Hi everyone, my name is Elaine, and today I'm going to be both summarizing and reviewing the 11th book in Terry Pratchett's Discworld series, Reaper Man, starting with the summary. Three auditors of reality come to an agreement. Developing a personality can only lead to one's end. Asriel turns his attention to the Discworld. Death finds a small, gold lifetimer with his name on it amongst his shelves. Death informs a grey-clad figure that he will appeal. Death is informed that he cannot, but that he gets to keep his horse. Wendell Poons, the oldest wizard on Unseen University staff, knows he is going to die. Death shows Albert his retirement present from Asriel. Albert decides to remain behind to serve the new Death that will arise. Death saddles Binky and rides off to spend his time. The wizards throw a going-away party for Wendell. Wendell gives the bursar his diary. Wendell dies a little past his expected hour. The Arch-Chancellor is surprised Death doesn't come to collect Wendell. When no one comes to collect him, Wendell Poons returns to Wendell Poons. Wendell awakens, his body functioning far better than it has in years. After realizing he is undead, he makes his way to the Great Hall. The other wizards are surprised to see him. Wendell informs them that Death never came. The other wizards wonder how they can rid themselves of Wendell. 6 senior wizards and the Arch-Chancellor discuss what they should do with Wendell. They can't agree on anything. Wendell leaves the university's grounds. Red's shoe, a zombie, graffitis an alley's wall before running away. During a meeting of the senior wizards, the Arch-Chancellor asserts that Death can't be abolished, that Death can't die. That's on page 43. The group decides to put an end to Wendell for his own good. A cupboard's contents spill into a room. Wendell tries to kill himself by jumping off the brass bridge. It doesn't work. Dibbler asks Sergeant Colin if being gifted things without his knowledge is a crime. He shows Colin his cellar. It's full of something. Wendell considers possible modes of suicide as he walks through the shades. 3 men try to mug him, but he scares them away. One of the men stabs Wendell in the chest during his escape. Wendell survives. Dibbler wonders who put all of the snow globes in his cellar there. Dibbler sells Colin a snow globe. Something plops in the darkness. Wendell is offered a good time, but when the speaker sees whom they made this offer to, they flee into the shades. Poons begins to really regret returning to his body and heads back toward the university. When Wendell returns to the university, the Arch-Chancellor and 4 senior wizards capture him and try to kill Wendell with garlic. It doesn't work. Wendell returns to his room. The wizards follow soon after and try to rid themselves of Wendell by showing him religious objects and showering him with sunlight. Neither method works. The wizards retreat in defeat. The wizards capture Wendell and carry him away. They intend to bury him at a crossroads with a stake hammered through him. After holding up traffic and pissing off several people as they dig a hole, the wizards bury Wendell. He finds a note about the Fresh Start Club pinned to his coffin. After resolving to figure out what is going on, to finding Death, Wendell digs his way out of his grave. Death takes a job working on Miss Flitworth's farm in the Octarine grass country below the towering peaks of the high ramp tops. That's on page 69. Dibbler sells his snow globes. In the university's Great Hall, Redcully's cruet moves of its own accord before exploding. Screws unscrew themselves. The chandelier collapses. No one in the Great Hall is hurt. The Patrician's palace guard arrives and informs the wizards that the Patrician is locked in his room because of all the furniture flying around, and that the cooks have fled the kitchen. The Patrician sent them to get the Arch-Chancellor's assistance. Redcully swears they're not the cause as the guard captain's spearhead falls on his foot. He and his boss aren't very happy. A great formless cloud of life drifted across the Discworld, like water building up behind a dam when the sluice gates are shut. With no Death to take the life force away when it was finished with, it had nowhere else to go. Here and there it earthed itself in random poltergeist activity, like flickers of summer lightning before a big storm. Everything that exists yearns to live. That's what the cycle of life is all about. That's the engine that drives the great biological pumps of evolution. That's on page 79. The senior wizards step out and into the city. There's clearly something wrong. The cobblestones are floating of their own accord, etc. The lecturer of recent runes doesn't believe the strange occurrences are the work of magic. The senior wrangler confirms his theory with his thermometer, an amazingly sensitive magical measuring device, which measures the density of a magical field. That's on page 83. Avadni Cake, a medium, exclaims that they shouted all at once. That's on page 86. The chief priest, Arch-Chancellor, and their retinues arrive at the palace, which has been thrown into chaos. The Arch-Chancellor and chief priest compare notes. Everything that's occurring is neither the work of magic or the gods. They decide to make their oft-warring groups work together in order to find a solution. The Patrician appears and calls the 2 heads to a meeting in his oblong office. The meeting commences once the city's guild leaders have arrived. No one knows what is causing everything to happen, and the Patrician wants to find out and put an end to it. Mrs. Cake consults her spirit guide, One Man Bucket. She's informed that she needs to tell someone something. She decides to speak to the wizards and makes her way to the university. Death, now known as Bill Dorr, cuts every blade of grass in Miss Flitworth's hay meadow with a scythe in order to produce hay. He cuts the blades one at a time. He feeds her pig, Nancy, and tries to teach her cockerel, Cyril, how to crow properly. Bill makes some friends at the local tavern. A child notices that he's a skeleton, unnerving him since it means his intrinsic powers were fading. That's on pages 109 and 110. Wendell heads to a meeting of the Fresh Start Club. The Arch-Chancellor returns to the university with his retinue. He's enraged since the Patrician doesn't know who to turn to in these trying times. Redcully decides to perform the rite of Ashkente in order to summon Death and figure out what's going on. Redcully speaks to Mrs. Cake. It doesn't go well. The Arch-Chancellor dismisses her without hearing what she has to say. Something small and shiny rolls into one of the alleys in the shades and vanishes. The wizards summon a hooded figure, but not Death, and informs them that Death has retired. word, that there will be a short transitional period before a suitable candidate presents itself, and then normal service will be resumed. In the meantime, we apologize for any unavoidable inconvenience caused by superfluous life effects. That's on page 118. The wizards realize that all of the deceased are queuing up and filling the world with life force. Wendell meets Red Shoe, the leader of the Fresh Start Club, and several of its members. They talk about their experiences as undead, dead rights, and more. Wendell returns to his room and retrieves a few hidden treasures from beneath one of his floorboards, such as a bag of coins and a little metal wheel. Schleppel, a bogeyman from the meeting, takes up residence in Poon's room. A tremor shoots through the floor. Schleppel informs Poons that it's a buildup of life force. Miss Flitworth tells Bill about her late father, a farmer and smuggler, and her betrothed, Rufus, a smuggler. He disappeared a day before their wedding. Some people think he ran away, but she believes he died in an avalanche. A gray figure appears before Bill. It informs him that there has been a mistake. It shatters the golden timer and tells him to return to his work. Bill leaves the farm with a touch of regret and becomes death. Bill returns to the farm and resumes his work. The inn catches on fire. The innkeeper's daughter is trapped inside. Bill doesn't want to save her since tinkering with the fate of one individual could destroy the whole world. That's on page 160. Miss Flitworth slaps him and informs him that he is to leave her farm that night. Eventually, Bill walks into the fire. The librarian won't allow Wendell into the library since he's dead. Schleppel suggests he speak to Mrs. Cake about life force. Wendell decides to pay her a visit. The inn explodes. Bill rescues the child and brings her to the farm. He makes sure the apothecary is sent for and says, "You must not take anything out of the room she's resting in. She is living on borrowed time." That's on page 168. The girl's hand is closed around Bill's timer. While speaking with Bill, Miss Flitworth realizes who Bill really is and learns that the child is living on his borrowed time. When it runs out in a few hours, they will both die, and the new death will come to collect them. Mrs. Cake informs Wendell that there is an imbalance and life force is currently building up. One of the compost heaps on the university's grounds begins moving. Wendell learns that the cause of all of the life force buildup is that lots of lives are ending but not going away. They're just staying here. That's on page 185. Wendell notices a snow globe on Mrs. Cake's mantelpiece and wonders where they're all coming from. The senior wizards rescue Moto, their gardener, from the compost heap before retreating to the Great Hall. The Arch-Chancellor throws some hot sauce on the acidic heap. It explodes. The wizards prepare to fight the remaining compost heaps that Moto mentioned and fear whatever other dead objects may suddenly come alive. Wendell speaks to One-Man Bucket and discovers that something is laying eggs, the snow globes. They don't all manage to or survive, but they have the ability to hatch into cities. The wizards continue their hunt. The bursar is captured by a trolley. The senior wizards pursue it. Poons returns to the library. Wendell realizes that the extra life force is tipping the balance and turning something that isn't really real into reality. That's on page 219. It begins by creating thousands of snow globes, something you'd want to keep and put away somewhere. And then it creates something useful, which can go anywhere, the trolleys, which people would overlook because they wouldn't think it had gotten where it had gotten to on its own. The wizards rescue the bursar from the trolley. They realize the trolleys have spread into the city and are all headed in the same direction. The group charges after them. Bill helps with the harvest. He overworks himself trying to beat the blacksmith's combination harvester, and truly knows pain and misery for the first time. The trolleys have overrun Ankh-Morpork and are beginning to make their way out of the city. Its denizens continue to fight alongside the wizards. Wendell finds a book that describes what's happening in Ankh-Morpork. He realizes that people are the life of a city and that it grow inside the city, where it's warm and protected, and then it break out, outside the city, and build something. Not a real city, a false city, that pulls the people, the life, out of the host, a predator. That's on page 239. Bill helps Miss Flitworth save her harvest from a storm. They spot the new death. Bill comes up with an idea. Bill and Miss Flitworth gather the child and ride into town. The new death comes after Bill. Wendell heads into the city and realizes that something is very wrong. The trolleys had formed a pyramid and produced a globe on a spike, which rained paper, which spoke of a sale, which starts tomorrow. Horrible music fills the air. Wendell and Ludmilla, Mrs. Cake's daughter, wonder if it's meant to attract humans. Blue light shines from within a large pile of trolleys. Wendell realizes the senior wizards are inside the heap, which has a lot of potential. The music is coming from within the heap. Several Ankh-Morporkians are standing around it. They appear to be waiting for something. Wendell walks into the light with Ludmilla and a handful of fresh starters who aren't affected by the music. After looking around, Wendell concludes that they're in some sort of unfinished hive. After having a run-in with a group of trolley soldiers, the travelers save Reg. Ludmilla and Wendell realize that the trolley hive must have a queen, and Wendell senses that the other wizards will be near it. Bill runs from the new death. When things don't go according to plan, he sends Miss Flitworth and the child away. The new death corners Bill. Miss Flitworth gives Bill some of her time. The old death defeats the new death with his old scythe. The gray shapes emerged. While retreating, Wendell and company pass the wizards, frozen in place like statues. The group begins looking for the source of the music and the queen. After removing a disc from the ceiling, the music stops. The trolleys halt. Tubing pours out of the hole in the ceiling. The wizards begin to awaken. They are carted away as the queen awakens and the hive begins to come apart. Wendell remains behind to fight the queen. After watching the destruction of the combination harvester, the gray figures disappear and the old death returns to his work. The wizards are tended to. The Arch-Chancellor organizes a rescue party for Wendell. It consists of himself, Red Shoe, the librarian, and the dean. Death summons all the lesser deaths that had been created in his absence. He absorbs them all with the exception of the death of rats. The rescue party retrieves Wendell. The Dean sets a trap. Schleppel rescues the party from the collapsing hive. The Dean's trap, a group of spells, destroy the hive. The group successfully escapes. Schleppel is invited to live in the university cellars. People begin to die normally again. The death of the Discworld speaks to Asriel. He asks Asriel to give him some time to both bring balance and return what was given. That's on page 313. Asriel grants his request. Death returns home with a handful of time. Bill presents Miss Flitworth with gifts, flowers, an assortment of chocolates, and the large diamond he stole from the lost jeweled temple of doom of Offler the crocodile god. He says he plans on taking her away. She wants to go to the harvest dance. The pair attend the dance. Miss Flitworth and Bill enjoy a night of dancing. Miss Flitworth realizes she is dead. Death reunites her with her lost love, Rufus, so they can be together forevermore. Death comes to collect Wendell. Wendell dies. Death adds cornfields to his realm. He is visited both by the death of fleas and the death of rats. He lets them live. Asriel remembers when all this will begin again. That's on page 343. Now for my book review. I felt as though this novel was slower than the earlier novels in the series and would have preferred a slightly faster pace. I also felt as though the wizard's efforts to correct the nature of Wendell's death was pretty dark. Essentially, Wendell is supposed to be dead, but winds up undead. He tries to correct it with suicide, jumping off a bridge and into the ink, etc. His wizard friends try to assist him as well by burying him at a crossroads with a stake through his heart, etc. Wendell even welcomes their efforts, and no one bats an eye about the fact that they're trying to legitimately kill someone because, as far as they're concerned, they're trying to right a wrong, and a zombie. And I just find this very discomforting and weird. Reaper Man contains a few continuity errors, an issue which we have not encountered since the beginning of the Discworld series with the Color of Magic and the Light Fantastic. An example of a continuity error in Reaper Man is the location of Wendell's diary. On page 19, Wendell gives a diary to the bursar at his going away party. On page 136, Wendell pulls his diary out from beneath a loose floorboard in his room. I'm not sure how this is possible. Wendell would have had to retrieve the diary from the bursar and place it beneath his floorboard for this to work, but this is never described in the novel. Another contradiction occurs on pages 96 and 182. On page 96, One Man Bucket is described as being Mrs. Cake's spirit guide. On page 182, he's described as an odd job ghost and not a guide. One could also argue that Bill's golden timer is surrounded by continuity errors. On page 147, the golden timer is shattered, but on page 170, and again several times later, the timer is described as being intact. It's maybe because it's more of a representation than anything else. It doesn't truly exist in the way we understand existence, but I'm not really sure. Either way, it's confusing when things shatter and then magically revert to a pre-shattered state. This novel contains several major typos and other grammatical errors. The biggest would probably be the two different spellings of Miss Flitworth's name. One was Miss Flitworth, and the other was Miss Flintworth, with an N. It was interesting to see Death transform from a largely emotionless, duty-driven character to one who experienced emotion and questioned them at every turn. To an individual who questioned, fought against his long-held beliefs, such as when he saved the girl from the fire despite his better judgment. To become more human and a more likable individual. I think humanizing Death made him a more intriguing individual, since duty-driven characters tend to be a bit bland. It was also interesting to watch someone experience things for their first time and to question things that people who have experienced them hundreds of times before take for granted or don't really think about anymore. Overall, I gave this book a 3.2 out of 5 star rating. I think I would have liked it more if it was just a bit more fast-paced. And there you have it. That is my summary and review of Terry Pratchett's Reaper Man. If you like what you saw here today, please smash that like button until it's blue. Leave a comment down below, subscribe, ring that bell so you know what's up, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye, guys.